Be seated.
This past week, I had opportunity to run into a lady, to meet again a lady that I had known for several years. Known her to be a member of the Lord's church. Known her also to be a lady who at times struggled with her relationship with God, who would be somewhat visibly faithful for a time and then would be visibly unfaithful for a time. So this is a member of another congregation, but I've known her, cared about her for some time, and so in running into her and having a conversation, eventually I was able to work into the subject of her relationship with God, and I said something like, "So please tell me that I can assume that every time the doors are open, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, you're there, you're worshiping with the church." And she gave me that look, of course, and she said, "No, really haven't been going for a while now." And then you see this quote up on the PowerPoint. She said, "Nobody from my church has asked me where I've been." And I proceeded to apologize for that. And I said, "You understand that it's still your choice, whether you worship or whether you not worship. And sometimes people are not going to be as loving or as attentive. Folks get busy and we get distracted with our own issues. But I said something like, you're important to them, you're important to God, and you can't ever let anybody come between you and having a great relationship with your Father." And she understood that and knows that. It was good for her to hear that again. And then I said, "Of course, you know that you're welcome to come and be a part of the Tuscumbia family. I don't think that would happen here, but there are no guarantees. I'm not trying to steal this woman, as you would maybe phrase it in your mind, not trying to proselyte and all, because I do think that what has happened with her is a tragedy that happens in many places. It has probably happened here from time to time. It could happen here again in the future. But we would do well to be as vigilant as we possibly can be to make sure that this is not something that is likely to occur here at the Tuscumbia Church of Christ. We must not be about the business, as you know, of turning back, of going back into the world after we have embraced the salvation of our souls. We understand that. We got to keep moving forward. But we also recognize that we must be about the business of making sure that others are not in the process of turning back. As much as we can control it, and we're limited in that area to some degree, we recognize that, but as much as it does relate to us and involve us and matter to us, we must be as eager as we can possibly be, first in not turning back ourselves, but secondly in diligently, vigilantly being aware of others who may be in the process of weakening their spiritual grip, of slipping away, of getting further and further away from God and from God's people. James chapter 5, verse 19 and 20 make us aware that it is a possibility, in some cases maybe a probability, that some people will fall away, that they will turn back into the world for a time. And verse 20 assures us that if we will turn that person back to the Lord, if we will seek them, if we will restore them, the phrase there is we will save a soul from death and actually cover a multitude of sins. And that is such a glorious vocation for each of us, to be about the business of doing what we can do, saying what we can say, to be a harvester of souls, maybe to be a re-harvester of souls. So pray for, please, this lady whom I ran into the other day, that she has now gone back to the Lord's family, that she has now re-strengthened her grip on her spirituality and her relationship with God, her relationship with God's people. And let us pray fervently for those who may be away from the body of Christ that assembles in this place today. Let us pray for them, and let us put feet on those prayers, and let us reach out and minister to them. I mentioned recently in a lesson, let's have the conversation. And I want to keep that foremost in our minds. Let's have the conversation. Let's talk to people. I cannot stand the word confront. I'm ready to confront somebody who uses the word confront, right? It's not a confrontation. It's a gentle, it's a loving, it's a warm conversation where we alert people, we re-alert people to our concern, to our compassion, our care for them. They are missed, they are loved, they are needed, they are valuable, and we're incomplete without them. And so let's continue to be mindful of that, prayerful, and let's be searching out even today, maybe, those who are sitting at the house on a rainy day thinking, well, they don't care. We do care. We get to demonstrate that as well. We get to turn a soul, and when we turn a soul, we also get to save a soul. We've been thinking in these lessons lately about Lot's wife. Jesus in Luke chapter 17, verse 32, has told us to remember her. We remember her tale is quite tragic because she's a woman that turned back. She's leaving behind a lot of misery and conflict and sin, ultimately hell. She's heading towards a new land, a fresh start, peace, joy, ultimately heaven, if the lady will just keep walking. But she turns back, she hesitates, she turns into a pillar of salt. And Jesus said, remember her. Remember her. And obviously, one of the reasons He wants us to remember her is so that we not be about the business today of reliving her last day, of also turning back, and at least figuratively, ourselves turning into a pillar of salt. We've speculated as to some of the reasons why she may have made such a horrific decision. We've suggested, first of all, that she turned back because she wasn't really committed to getting to the new place in the first place, just kind of going through the motions of exiting the city. Secondly, we suggested that she just did not believe God meant what He said, don't turn back. She turned back, thinking maybe He doesn't mean it, but He meant it then. He always means what He says. And then number three, one of the reasons we've suggested that she turned back is because of an earlier decision that the family made to pitch their tent in a really wicked place, a place where you could not even find 10 righteous souls. Not a good place to be, not a good place to raise a family. They lived in the wicked city began to live in them, and I would suggest that contributed to her deciding to turn back, to hesitate. And then number four, and we'll think about this for a few minutes this morning, she turned back because she did not realize how great and how close her new home was. If she would just keep walking, she was going to have such a better life, a fresh start, and she chose to reject that. And obviously the application for us in 2013 is pretty clear, right? That we are in danger of turning back for the same reasons that she turned back. Not committed fully to getting to the new promised land, just going through some motions, not believing God really, really means what He says, pitching our tents around some folks that we need to be withdrawing from, or then maybe turning back because we just don't realize how wonderful heaven is going to be, how close heaven is. Just a few more steps and we're going to be there. So we dare not turn back away from that. By the way, I really appreciate the study that many of you have done of Genesis 19 in particular, as we've been going through these lessons together. And a couple of our better Bible students in this congregation have suggested that Brother Jeff, perhaps she turned back, looked back, hesitated because she had some more children that they were leaving behind in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And I would encourage you to study that text a little bit more carefully, and you'll see that there's really no evidence that they were leaving behind any more children. There is a question asked by the angels. Do you have other family? Do you have other sons, daughters, son-in-laws, depending on your translation? Is there anybody else we need to help you get out of the city with you? That's the idea behind that. But there's no express indication that they're leaving behind children. Now, it would be more understandable, wouldn't it? Moms especially. You can see this. You got a heart for children. We fathers do too, by the way. But I think mom especially would be more vulnerable to turning back and thinking and worrying about my precious children that I'm leaving behind. But I really don't think there's enough evidence in the text to say that that's what was going on. What is going on that's real clear from the text is that there are two sons-in-laws that are being left behind as the family flees the cities that's being destroyed. Which kind of begs the question, why didn't the daughters that are leaving their husbands, why didn't they hesitate? Why didn't they look back? It seemed like if anybody in the family were going to be inclined to linger, to hesitate, it would have been them. But they're not the ones that hesitated. They're not the ones that looked back. It was Mrs. Lot. I want you to look at this next picture that they're going to put up on the wall now. You recognize that? Raise your hand, not if you recognize it, raise your hand if you've ever been in that room and actually seen that chair. Officer Little, Sister Johnson, and Brother Jeff. What's the nickname of that chair? The Yellow Mama? Yellow Mama. When I was between the ages of 6 and 7, that prison opened up in Atmore. It's called now Holman Prison. I don't remember it being called that when it first opened up. But they had an open house, and so we lived in Bruton, which is not far from Atmore. So my mom and dad, curious about this new fangled prison is going to be opening up, and so we went on the tour with a lot of folks. There were hundreds of people touring this prison that day. And again, 6 or 7 years of age, I am real impressionable, and this is an exciting and a scary place. She said, no prisoners in there yet. They're getting ready, fresh paint everywhere, getting ready to open that place up for business. And we go in all the hallways, go in the cells, and then we come to the room that has this chair. This is Alabama's electric chair, nicknamed Yellow Mama. It's very interesting. The paint, which is yellow from this electric chair, the paint came from the paint that those prisoners were using, that yellow paint they were using to paint the stripes on the highways near the prison. That's how they had some extra yellow paint, so let's paint this wooden chair yellow. Now I can tell you, even at the age of 6 or 7, being in that room next to that chair, and then having my dad explain what that chair is for and who that chair is for, that gets a little fella's attention. That was a sobering experience, unsettling, frightening. It's been a while since I was 6 or 7 years of age, and I remember that chair, that vivid yellow chair, and those leather straps and those electrical probes. I remember it vividly, even now. One thing that I'm especially thankful for today, and back then also, that chair was not made for me. And I'm thankful to report the obvious that Yellow Mama was not made for anybody in this room. Now, why am I talking about that this morning? Because I'm a kind of a visual person in the way I think things, the way I see things. And I want us to understand that Mrs. Lot, she's in a sense, she's leaving behind the Yellow Mama of her day. She's leaving behind a death sentence. And she's got to understand what she fails to understand, that chair, that place, that future was not for her. She had something much better ahead of her. And we got to understand the same thing. Our future is not in a chair like that, and neither is it in a place called hell. Just as that chair was not prepared for anybody in this room, it's prepared for bad people, the place hell, it was not made for any of us. God's not that kind of Father. Revelation chapter 25, verse 41, we learn that this place of everlasting fire is prepared not for us, but rather it is prepared specifically for the devil and his angels. And that's not you. And that's not me. Revelation chapter 21, verse 8 has a list of those who get to share in that eternal experience with the devil and his angels. Your name is not on this list. Cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Your name's not here. Your way of behaving is not here listed in this passage. Hell is horrible. We know all the senses it affects. We know it's a hot place, a dark place, place of memories, place of terrible cries. We know it's an eternal place that once one enters, one cannot exit. But thanks to God and the love that He has for us and the sacrifice of His Son, that place is not our future. It is not our destiny. It is not our home. Just as that chair wasn't made for us, hell's not made for us, but heaven, heaven with all its wonders, it was made for you. It was made for us. And I'm grateful that once we enter that gate, we leave behind the things of this life that hurt us so. We leave behind the sin. We leave behind the guilt. We leave behind the death and the sorrows and the cancers and the goodbyes. That stuff doesn't get to go on the other side of the gate. We get to go by the grace of God on the other side of the gate. I'm looking forward to that, and I hope you are. John chapter 14, verses 1 and following. Jesus' disciples, they're unsettled, they're nervous. Christ is about to leave them for a time. Let not your heart be troubled, He says. I go to prepare a place, that's heaven, for you. That's the place that God had prepared for His disciples then and today. Revelation 21 verse 4 describes it as a place that is so beautiful, like a bride adorned for her husband. There'll be no death there, no sorrow there. All these former things, all the bad things of life will be passed away. And God, when we're there, if we're prone to have any tears at all, He'll wipe them away. Again, that's the place prepared for us. That's the place prepared for Mrs. Lot. 1 Corinthians 2:9 puts it so well. Eye, meaning these kind of eyes up here, eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, nor has entered to the heart of man the things that God has prepared for those that love Him. Means that we can't possibly fathom. We've got rich imaginations, many of us do, but we cannot begin to approach imagining how wonderful heaven must be. We sing it, but we can't imagine it. We really can't. It's going to be a precious, precious forever place. For you, it has been made. And for me, thank God. May I ask you to think about this question. What sin is better than heaven? Can you think of one? Or 10 or 20? Can you think of a sin that is better than heaven? Something that is so much fun that we would exchange our souls for. I mean, you got to imagine, you got to figure, that'd be a really, really enjoyable sin. If I'm going to exchange hell for it, it better be pretty special, wouldn't you say? Sin always costs a whole lot more than it's ever been worth. Comes with a price. If we could get Mrs. Lot back in here today with us, and we could ask her to testify, ask her just one question. Mrs. Lot, was it worth it? Was the hesitation, the act of disobedience and whatever you got out of turning back, was the price you paid, was it worth what you did? What would she say? Oh, I'd do that again 1,000 times. She would so eloquently and passionately testify to us, it wasn't worth it. No sin is ever worth what it costs us or God or those that love us. Esau, was the suit worth your entire inheritance? No, he would testify. Prodigal son, we've studied him recently. Was the journey, what was the price that you paid to do what you did, to get what you got? Was the cost justified? Was it something you do again? Is it something you'd recommend to others? Was the pig pen so enjoyable that you would go to that place again, that you would tell others to come with you? Or was the price too high? And he would say, the price is too high. Sin will always cost us more than we should ever be willing to pay. No sin is worth the price. Now, this can be misunderstood, so please, if you would, stir around in your mind and listen very carefully here to what I'm saying. Because hell is so hot, and because heaven is so glorious and wonderful, and if someone is going to sin, if someone is going to turn back, if someone is going to let go of the plow and go back into the world, I almost, and I would guess that you would join me in this, we almost would hope that the person who makes such a choice to go back into sin, we almost hope that they enjoy themselves. If they're going to throw their souls away, rebelling against God, don't we almost hope that while they are in rebellion that they have a good time? Because we recognize that the good time will come to a violent and eternal end eventually. And the grand pity, and we've all observed this, maybe in our own lives, but certainly in the lives of others, when people are in rebellion, when they're in the pig pen, when they're away from God, they're not joyful. They're not happy. Maybe briefly that kind of lures them into the sin, but that pleasure of sin doesn't last. And we observe these people, they're so miserable. They have no peace. They have no joy. And it is such a, it's a bad decision anyway. It's a foolish choice anyway. But we've got just a vast number of good people choosing to lose their souls, committing sins that do not bring them any lasting pleasure. And we got to think there's something wrong with this picture. You're choosing to be miserable here, exchanging your eternal birthright, your eternal salvation, for sins that are making you miserable. There's something wrong with that picture. There's something wrong with the mind that processes choices that way. If we're going to choose to be profane, if we're going to choose to be immoral, if we're going to choose to be rebellious or selfish or stingy or unkind, or if we're going to choose to be absent from our post when we're needed to be our post, then let us hope that if we're going to make that kind of foolish choice, that we're at least getting some kind of joy from that, some kind of satisfaction from that. But there is none that lasts. And that's just the devil, he can trick us. He's good at what he does. Got to acknowledge that. And he gets us to commit sin gets folks to commit sin, to throw away their everlasting salvation, and they're doing things that are actually making them miserable. Miserable. If we want joy here and in the hereafter, we embrace the gospel of Christ. We embrace His boundaries, His mores, His instructions for our life. It is in the doing of His bidding that we find our joy here and in the hereafter. It is in the walking of His path that we find our greatest pleasures that never come to an end. The lady I referenced at the beginning of the lesson this morning, a lady in the process of turning back, in the process of, at least in a figurative sense, turning into a pillar of salt. The good news is, when I encountered her, she was not yet a pile of salt. She was a person that still had the prospect and the potential to be the salt of the earth, right? And as I scan this wonderful audience, thank you for coming out on such a rainy morning. And we've got a lot of folks that were unable to be out this morning with us that are watching us by internet. But as I look around the room, good news, I see no pillars of salt, no piles of salt are here. Now, maybe some of us are kind of headed in that direction, but we're not there yet, and we can turn this thing around. Revelation 2:10 is a mighty encouragement for all. It says, be faithful, be full of faith unto death, and I will give you a crown of life. The crown of life is for the one who keeps going when the temptations are strong to turn back. The crown of life is for the one who can persevere when others don't persevere. The crown of life is for the one who remains faithful even if the others that are trying to be faithful aren't as attentive and kind and as thoughtful. And those who receive the crown of life are those who go back to the family even if the family didn't check on them as we should have. Be faithful unto death and get this crown of life. We can't turn back, can we? Can we? Because we understand just how terrible hell is. And we understand how glorious heaven is. And it's just a few more steps. I don't think anybody had ever turned back. They really realized how terrible hell is, how glorious heaven is, and how close now heaven is. We've been at this, some of us, a long time. We dare not stop now. We dare not stop now. I was reading a long time ago about some folks that back before they discovered the Grand Canyon, they got real close to it, and they never saw it. They never saw this big hole, this beautiful hole in the ground, because they just didn't understand that it was there. And it was so close and so spectacular. Heaven is there. It's close now, closer than ever before. And it's more spectacular than we can ever imagine. Don't stop. Don't stop your walk towards the promised land. If we can help you today with that journey, I hope you'll come and let us. If we can help you begin the journey by taking your confession that you believe Jesus is the Son of God and burying you in water for the remission of your sins, I hope you'll give us that privilege here and now while together we stand and sing.